Carter arrived at Fort Campbell with a mixture of determination and nerves. At 21, she was younger than most of the soldiers she would serve alongside, and she knew that being new would make her an easy target for scrutiny. But wasn't just any recruit. She had grown up in a small Ohio town where challenges were met with grit and perseverance, and she carried that same spirit into every step of her military training. Her backpack was heavy with supplies, but the weight on her shoulders was far heavier, the judgment of the veterans she was about to meet. From the moment she walked into the barracks, sensed the subtle resistance from her unit. The older soldiers had years of experience, months in combat zones, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. When she introduced herself, some barely looked up from their games or conversations. One grizzled sergeant muttered under his breath, "Great, another rookie who thinks she knows everything." Smiled politely but didn't respond. She had learned early that proving herself required action, not words. Her first few days were a blur of training exercises, morning drills, and meticulous inspections. She noticed how the veterans executed maneuvers almost by instinct, relying on muscle memory and experience. She studied them silently, learning where they were strong, and more importantly, where they were vulnerable. Quickly realized that the unit's confidence often masked overconfidence. A minor misstep could cascade into serious consequences in the field. She committed every detail to memory: the patterns of patrol, the standard operating procedures, the quirks of each soldier. Despite her dedication, faced constant doubt from her peers. During weapons training, one of the older soldiers sneered, "Careful, rookie, don't shoot yourself in the foot." During navigation exercises, another laughed at her precise maps and careful planning. "Maps are for kids. We go with instincts," he said, tapping his compass casually. Kept her cool. She could have argued, but experience had taught her that anger or defensiveness would only make her position weaker. She knew that actions spoke louder than words, and she planned to let hers do the talking. In the evenings, while the others relaxed, played cards, or told war stories, would stay up in her bunk, analyzing reports and memorizing terrain layouts. She pored over satellite images, terrain maps, and past operation logs. She made mental notes about choke points, potential ambush zones, and escape routes. She noticed inconsistencies the veterans didn't, patterns that hinted at hidden risks. It was tedious work, but found comfort in preparation. She knew that while experience was valuable, careful observation could often prevent disaster, and she intended to be ready for the day her knowledge would matter. Her first encounter with direct skepticism came during a tactical briefing. The commanding officer outlined a mission to secure a village known for insurgent activity, had reviewed the intel and noticed several inconsistencies. Satellite images showed unusual patterns of movement, and certain access routes weren't mentioned in the report. Tentatively, she raised her hand. "Sir, I noticed that the eastern approach has multiple blind spots. If the militia anticipates our route, it could become a trap." A few soldiers snickered behind her back. The officer glanced at her, clearly irritated by the interruption, and waved her off. "We've done this before, Carter. Stick to the plan." Nodded, suppressing the frustration that bubbled inside. She didn't argue. Instead, she memorized the details, committing the potential threat to memory. She had learned that persistence sometimes required patience, that preparation was a quiet weapon, and that her moment would come, not when others approved, but when circumstances demanded it. Over the next few days, continued to navigate the fine line between proving herself and staying in the shadows. During combat simulations, she noticed that some of the veterans became complacent when the drills seemed routine. They relied on habits and patterns, missing details she had painstakingly noted. Quietly corrected her own errors, anticipating problems before they happened, and gradually a few soldiers began to notice. "She's meticulous," one murmured. "Maybe she's not as green as we thought." But such acknowledgments were fleeting, often drowned out by the louder skepticism of the group. One afternoon, during a live-fire exercise, skills were tested more than ever. The squad had to navigate a simulated urban environment under strict time constraints. While others rushed blindly, she methodically scanned the streets, noting potential danger zones and routes of cover. When a simulated ambush sprung, reacted instinctively, covering her team and guiding them to safety. For a moment, the veterans froze, startled by the rookie's precision and calm under pressure. Though the exercise ended and accolades were given to others, his performance left a subtle, unspoken mark. Some eyes that had dismissed her now held a glimmer of respect. Despite these small victories, isolation remained her constant companion. Meals were eaten alone at the edge of the mess hall. Conversations were polite but distant. Soldiers occasionally offered advice with a hint of condescension. "Don't overthink it, rookie," they said, accepted it all with quiet grace. She didn't need friendship to prove herself, she needed opportunity. And deep inside she felt the tension building, the feeling that the mission would arrive, and when it did, she would be ready. Late at night, wrote letters to her family, describing the training and the frustrations, never revealing the growing storm in her mind. She reflected on every lesson learned, every insult absorbed, and every skill perfected. Her thoughts were a mix of determination and strategy, mapping not just the terrain of training grounds but the terrain of human behavior, anticipating hesitation, fear, and overconfidence among her fellow soldiers. She realized that while the battlefield demanded physical strength and precision, the unseen battlefield of trust and respect was just as critical. By the end of her first week, had carved out a quiet identity for herself. She was the rookie, yes, but she was also observant, prepared, and unshakable. The veterans didn't know it yet, but the one they ignored would be the one who could see what they could not. Every whispered doubt, every mocking comment only strengthened her resolve. She didn't crave recognition, she craved readiness. She knew that when the mission came, when danger arrived unannounced, she would be the one to act, and no one would have a choice but to follow her lead. And so, Carter stood on the edge of the barracks that first night, staring at the horizon beyond the base. She didn't yet know exactly how or when the test would come, but she felt it in her bones. Something was coming, and when it did, the rookie everyone ignored would finally be seen, not for her youth, not for her inexperience, but for the courage and clarity that had been quietly growing inside her all along. The battle had not yet begun, but was already preparing to change it forever. The day after the exercises, woke before dawn, the base still shrouded in mist. Her thoughts, as always, raced ahead to the mission she had heard whispers about, an operation in a remote village where insurgent activity had disrupted the lives of civilians. The unit had been briefed in fragments over the past few days, but today would be the full mission briefing. Stomach churned with a mixture of anticipation and unease. She had pored over every satellite image, every intelligence report, and every map she could find, yet a gnawing sense told her the information given to the team barely scratched the surface. The briefing room buzzed with the low murmur of soldiers, veterans exchanging confident nods. Took a seat near the back, pulling her notebook from her pack. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel, entered with his usual commanding presence. A hush fell over the room. Had a reputation for decisiveness, a man who had served multiple tours overseas and whose orders were rarely questioned. Listened carefully, scribbling notes as he outlined the operation. Secure the village, neutralize any hostile forces, and ensure the safety of civilians trapped in the area. On the screen, satellite images flickered. Buildings, dirt roads, and patches of dense forest appeared, described the terrain as straightforward, the approach routes safe, and the expected resistance as minimal. The veterans nodded, their confidence almost palpable. One grizzled sergeant leaned back, arms crossed, and smirked at, "Piece of cake, rookie, don't get in the way." His eyes traced the paths they would take, her instincts immediately firing. Something didn't align. The eastern approach, the one highlighted as a primary access route, had several blind spots she had already identified in her study. Hidden depressions in the ground, clusters of buildings that could conceal snipers, and vegetation thick enough to hide IEDs, all factors that had been glossed over in the official briefing. She raised her hand tentatively, unsure if the veterans would let her speak. "Sir," she began, her voice calm but firm, I noticed several inconsistencies in the satellite data. The eastern approach has multiple choke points and potential ambush zones. If the militia anticipates our route, we could walk right into a trap." A ripple of laughter traveled through the room. The older soldiers exchanged smirks, whispering under their breaths. One of them muttered, "Here we go, rookie trying to play tactician." His gaze narrowed. "Carter, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but this mission is based on intel. Stick to the plan." He paused, giving her a look that was part reprimand, part dismissal. "You'll have your chance in the field, but for now, focus on following orders." Swallowed her frustration. She had expected resistance, but it still stung. She didn't argue. Instead, she made additional notes in her notebook, drawing her own maps of alternative routes, potential cover points, and locations where the enemy might be hiding. She knew the veterans had the experience, but experience could also breed complacency. She needed to be ready for when the unthinkable happened. After the briefing, the squad assembled outside the base. The convoy of armored vehicles was ready, engines idling, soldiers checking weapons, securing packs, and issuing last-minute orders. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows over the dusty tarmac. Climbed into the rear vehicle, the one often reserved for less experienced soldiers. From her vantage point, she studied the route ahead. The eastern road stretched like a narrow ribbon between high embankments, just as she had feared. She glanced at the veterans in the front vehicles. Some were chatting casually, laughing about minor past missions. Others double-checked their gear, exuding the quiet confidence of soldiers who had faced far worse than a small village insurgency. His heart beat faster. She didn't doubt their courage, only their perception. Every instinct screamed that the mission was more dangerous than they realized. As the convoy rolled out, his mind raced through possible scenarios. She envisioned ambushes, miscommunications, and split-second decisions that could save lives. She reviewed every exit route she had identified, every cover point, and every vantage position. For hours, she rehearsed contingencies in her mind, whispering them under her breath when no one was listening. She knew that no one would heed her warnings, not yet, but she had to be ready. The unit approached the first stretch of road leading into the valley where the village lay. Dust swirled from the convoy's wheels, mingling with the morning haze. Noticed subtle changes in the landscape, freshly disturbed dirt along the road's edge, a fallen branch positioned suspiciously, shadows that didn't align with the morning sun. Her pulse quickened. These were minor details, the kind seasoned soldiers might overlook in confidence, but they screamed danger to her. Inside the lead vehicle, Sergeant Daniels barked orders to maintain formation. "Keep it tight, eyes forward, this is going to be a routine sweep." He cast a glance at and snorted. "Routine for rookies too, Carter. Don't panic." Forced herself to breathe steadily, not reacting. Panic would accomplish nothing. Instead, she kept scanning, her fingers tracing invisible lines along her map, recalculating risks and plotting contingencies. The convoy moved deeper into the valley. Unease grew. Her observations clashed violently with the unit's confidence. She noticed a cluster of trees that could conceal a sniper team, gaps in the embankment perfect for planting explosives, and the subtle curve of the road that offered no immediate escape if the convoy was ambushed. She wanted to shout warnings, to take action immediately, but she remembered words, "Follow orders." She had no authority yet, only insight. Hours passed as the convoy advanced cautiously. Eyes rarely left the terrain, analyzing every shadow, every mound of dirt, every anomaly. The soldiers laughed occasionally, talking about home, sports, and past missions. Their comfort was jarring against the growing tension she felt. Understood that overconfidence often preceded disaster, and she silently prepared herself for the moment she knew would come. Finally, the outskirts of the village appeared on the horizon. Small buildings clustered tightly together, streets narrow and winding, perfect for concealment. Stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed that the area was prepared for an ambush. Her voice caught in her throat. She had seen this scenario before in simulations and intelligence reports, but now it was real. She tried again to voice her concern. "Sir, the building's on the east side." Carter interrupted sharply. "We've assessed the area. Stick to your vehicle. Your job is to follow orders, not give them." The dismissal was final. Clenched her fists silently, nodding in compliance, but her mind was alive with calculations. She would watch, remember, and act when the time came. As the sun climbed higher, casting harsh light over the dusty valley, realized that this mission would not be routine. The unit had overlooked crucial details, blind to the danger that lay ahead. She could not change the orders, could not force the veterans to listen, but she could prepare herself, anticipate the enemy's moves, and remain ready. When the moment arrived, and she knew it would, she would be the one to act decisively. And so the convoy pressed on, unaware that every passing second brought them closer to the trap had foreseen. The rookie no one wanted to hear had quietly prepared, studying, analyzing, and anticipating. She did not yet command respect, but she commanded readiness. Her moment was coming, and when it did, the battlefield would demand that even the skeptics follow her lead. The tension was palpable, the stage set, and Carter stood silently in the rear of the vehicle, ready for a test none of them expected, but one she had anticipated all along. The mission would not unfold as planned, and when it went wrong, the rookie they ignored would be the one to turn it around. The morning air was thick with dust and the faint hum of the convoy's engines as it crept toward the village. Carter sat in the rear vehicle, eyes scanning every inch of the road, every shadow cast across the barren terrain. The eastern approach, the one she had warned about, stretched ahead like a narrow ribbon between steep embankments and scattered trees. Every instinct screamed danger. She could feel it in her bones, the subtle signs the others dismissed, the anomalies she had memorized from the satellite images, the slight tremor in the wind that hinted at hidden threats. The veterans laughed and joked as they drove, their overconfidence palpable. Sergeant Daniels in the lead vehicle glanced at the rear mirror occasionally, catching his intense gaze. He shook his head with a grin. "Relax, rookie. It's a straight shot. Nothing to see but dirt and rocks." Offered a small smile but didn't respond. She had learned that arguing would only make her position weaker. Actions, she reminded herself, would speak louder than words. The convoy entered a narrow canyon, the walls rising on either side like silent sentinels. Pulse quickened. Every detail she had noted, the embankments, the curves in the road, the thick vegetation, aligned perfectly with her worst fears. Hidden from the casual eye, she spotted subtle signs of disturbance. Faint tire tracks veering off the main road, brush pushed aside as if by heavy footsteps, and broken branches arranged unnaturally. It was a classic setup. The militia had anticipated this approach. A sudden, distant crack echoed through the canyon. Heart skipped a beat. She tightened her grip on her notebook, ready to react. "Ambush," she whispered under her breath. Her eyes scanned the canyon walls, searching for the glint of metal or the movement of shadows. The veterans, oblivious, continued their chatter, checking their gear and adjusting their helmets. They did not yet realize the danger that lay ahead. Then it happened. Explosions shattered the morning silence, sending a wave of heat and debris across the convoy. The lead vehicle jerked violently as an IED detonated beneath it, throwing the soldiers inside off balance. Shouts and screams filled the air. Smoke and dust choked the canyon, mingling with the acrid smell of burning rubber and gunpowder. Dove to the floor of her vehicle, pressing herself against the metal, trying to stay low. Bullets ricocheted off the canyon walls, striking the earth with lethal precision. Chaos erupted. Soldiers scrambled for cover, shouting orders that barely registered above the roar of gunfire. The convoy stalled, vehicles blocking each other in the narrow path. His mind raced. This was exactly what she had feared. She had warned them, but no one had listened. Now her instincts were all that stood between survival and disaster. She scanned the canyon walls, memorizing enemy positions, noting the gaps between trees and the shadows cast by rocks. Her training kicked in. She began issuing calm, precise instructions over the radio, guiding soldiers to safer positions. "Move left. Use the embankment for cover. Don't fire until I give the signal." Her voice cut through the chaos like a beacon. The veterans hesitated, stunned by the precision of her commands. They were trained soldiers, yes, but they had relied on experience rather than observation, instinct rather than preparation. Orders were different, they were calculated, informed by careful study and anticipation. Slowly, one by one, the soldiers began to follow her guidance, moving with purpose instead of panic. Notice the leader of the ambushing militia, a figure perched on a ridge signaling positions to his men. Bullets tore through the air around him, but he remained partially concealed. Assess the situation quickly. If they didn't neutralize him, the ambush would continue to overwhelm the convoy. She grabbed her rifle, taking aim at a slight gap in the cover. Her hands were steady despite the chaos. She fired, the shot precise, and the figure slumped. A ripple of disbelief spread through the unit. Did she just? One veteran murmured, barely audible over the gunfire. Didn't pause to answer. There was no time for awe, only action. She continued directing soldiers, pointing out enemy positions, guiding fire teams to flank, and helping injured comrades reach safer ground. The ambush had been meticulously planned, but foresight and quick thinking began to turn the tide. The firefight lasted for what felt like hours, but was only minutes in reality. The militia, initially confident in their trap, began to falter. Leadership, the one thing no one expected from the rookie, created a ripple of coordination amidst chaos. Soldiers who had doubted her earlier now followed her without question, relying on her instincts as much as their own training. Every maneuver, every order, shifted the momentum just enough to gain control. Amid the smoke and shattered vehicles, noticed a small group of civilians huddled behind a partially collapsed wall. Fear had frozen them in place. Without hesitation, she directed a few soldiers to secure a safe path and guide the civilians out. Her voice remained calm, steady, authoritative. "Follow my lead. Stay low. Keep moving." Slowly, the civilians moved to safety, their gratitude barely registering in the chaos of battle, but noted it silently. Protecting them was the mission, and she had delivered. Then a secondary explosion rocked the canyon. A hidden device had predicted. The veterans faltered for a moment, caught off guard. Heart pounded, but her mind remained sharp. She quickly directed a detour around the blast, pointing out cover points and rallying her team. The militia tried to regroup, but proactive strategy had stripped them of the advantage. What had begun as a desperate, life-threatening ambush was now a contest of control, and was seizing it. By mid-morning, the ambush had effectively collapsed. The militia's coordinated assault unraveled under the combination of foresight, her rapid-fire instructions, and the soldiers' newfound coordination. Vehicles that had been pinned down were able to move again. The canyon, once a death trap, became a controlled battlefield. The veterans, some with faces pale from shock and adrenaline, finally looked at with recognition. This was the rookie they had ignored, the one whose warnings they had dismissed, and she had just saved lives. His body shook from adrenaline, dust, and exhaustion, but her mind remained clear. She continued to scan for threats, ensuring that the convoy could safely retreat from the canyon. She gave orders with precision, ensuring that every soldier, every civilian, remained protected. By the time the dust settled, the ambush was over, and the survivors were beginning to comprehend the gravity of what had occurred. The veterans gathered around her briefly, expressions a mix of relief, awe, and reluctant respect. Sergeant Daniels, who had mocked her before the mission, clapped her on the shoulder. "Never thought I'd say this, rookie, but you saved us today." Nodded, tired but composed, she didn't need praise. She had anticipated this moment and she had acted. That was enough. Even as the convoy moved toward the village, his mind raced ahead. The battle had been survived, but the fight was not yet over. There were more challenges ahead, more decisions that required precision, courage, and foresight. And one thing was clear: the rookie who had been ignored was now the most reliable asset in the unit. In the midst of chaos, had proven herself, not through luck, not through brute strength, but through careful observation, anticipation, and decisive action. The veterans had underestimated her, but the battlefield had demanded her competence. And she had delivered, single-handedly turning a deadly ambush into a controlled operation, saving lives in the process. For Carter, the battle had been more than just a mission. It was the moment her skills, preparation, and courage had been tested, and she had emerged not as the rookie everyone doubted, but as the soldier everyone would now rely upon. The next phase of the mission awaited, and she was ready. The dust from the ambush still clung to the soldiers' uniforms, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Carter climbed out of her vehicle, knees stiff from crouching, eyes scanning the canyon ahead. The convoy had survived the initial attack, but the danger was far from over. Her heart raced as adrenaline coursed through her veins, sharpening every sense. Around her, veteran soldiers were assessing damage, tending to the wounded, and scanning the terrain with a mixture of relief and disbelief. For the first time, many of them were forced to recognize the rookie's skill, even if only silently. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel, staggered from the lead vehicle, clutching his arm. Blood seeped through his uniform and his face was pale with shock. "Hold positions," he shouted, though his voice lacked the usual authority. Several soldiers rushed to assist him, trying to staunch the bleeding and maintain morale. The unit, once coordinated, now teetered on the edge of disarray. Pulse quickened. She knew instinctively that this was the moment she had prepared for, the one where her planning and observation would determine whether the unit survived the rest of the encounter. Chaos spread quickly. Soldiers shouted over one another, unsure of how to proceed. Vehicles were damaged, communication lines were faltering, and the militia was regrouping, testing their advantage. Quickly assess the situation. The canyon, while dangerous, provided opportunities if used strategically. High ground, embankments, narrow, every element of terrain she had studied could now serve as a defensive asset. Her voice cut through the clamor, steady and commanding. "Team, form up along the embankments, cover each other. Move to the high ground on my mark," she shouted. There was a brief pause as the veterans hesitated, uncertain whether to follow a rookie's commands. But the urgency in her tone, combined with the clarity of her directions, left no room for doubt. Slowly, they began to obey, repositioning themselves along natural cover points that had identified. Every movement was deliberate, coordinated, and precise. Turned to a small group of soldiers nearby, pointing toward the ridge where the militia had set up temporary positions. "You three, flank left. Use the cover of the rocks. Keep low. Disable the snipers before they get another shot off." She paused, scanning the remaining enemy positions. "The rest hold positions. Don't fire until I give the signal. Watch for civilians. Stay sharp." The veterans exchanged wary glances. It was one thing to hear orders from a rookie. It was another to follow them in a live firefight. Yet the logic of commands, the confidence in her calculations, and the calm precision of her voice left them no choice. One by one, they moved to the positions she designated, securing choke points and defensive areas, restoring a semblance of order amidst the chaos. His mind worked rapidly, analyzing the militia's likely next moves. She noticed patterns in their attacks, the way they used cover, their firing sequences, and the timing of their advances. She relayed instructions to her team, redirecting fire to counter flanking maneuvers and protect vulnerable points in the unit's formation. Every order she gave was grounded in observation, anticipation, and knowledge of the terrain. Slowly, the tide of the skirmish began to shift. Amidst the smoke and gunfire, spotted two of her fellow soldiers pinned down near a fallen vehicle. Bullets ricocheted dangerously close, and the soldiers froze, unsure of how to advance. Without hesitation, she sprinted across the open ground, ducking behind debris for cover, and guided them to safety. "Keep low, stay close to the rocks. Move now." Her presence injected confidence into their movements, demonstrating leadership born of action rather than rank. The militia, realizing their initial ambush had been partially foiled, attempted a coordinated push from the canyon's opposite end. Recalculated quickly, issuing precise orders to counter their advance. "Left flank, suppress fire. Right team, cover the ridge. Don't let them break formation." Her directions created a network of overlapping fields of fire, turning the narrow canyon from a death trap into a defensible stronghold. Her rapid decision-making left the veterans awestruck. Sergeant Daniels, who had mocked her days ago, found himself following her lead without hesitation. She's got this, he muttered, barely audible. Another veteran, younger and less confident, nodded in agreement, eyes fixed on as she coordinated movements like a seasoned commander. The rookie they had dismissed was now the guiding force in the firefight. The sounds of battle echoed through the canyon, bullets striking rock, the roar of gunfire, and the occasional explosion. Amidst it all, maintained her composure, scanning for threats, issuing orders, and keeping morale intact. She knew that panic was the enemy's ally. Calm, precise action was her weapon. She moved like a conductor, orchestrating the chaos, directing soldiers, and with a strategic vision that few could match. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The militia's advances became less organized, their attacks fragmented. Seized the opportunity to identify the enemy's command positions, the locations from which they coordinated their assault. With the help of 2 quick volunteers, she planned a flanking maneuver, aiming to neutralize the command center and further tip the battle in their favor. "Listen up," she called out to her volunteers. "We move quietly along the left ridge, take out the communication points. Do not engage unnecessarily. Timing is everything." The pair nodded, trusting her instincts completely. Stayed in position, covering them and adjusting the rest of the unit's formation to maintain a defensive advantage. Every movement, every instruction was calculated to maximize survival and efficiency. The militia, sensing their control slipping, began to retreat from key positions. Directed a concentrated push, reclaiming territory and securing the high ground. Soldiers who had been skeptical of her abilities now followed her commands instinctively, trusting her judgment completely. The rookie they had ignored had become the anchor of their survival, the strategist whose actions were determining the outcome of the battle. Even as the immediate threat waned, remained vigilant. She checked for wounded soldiers, ensured civilians were protected, and scanned the horizon for any remaining enemy positions. Her exhaustion was physical, yes, but her focus never wavered. Leadership, she knew, was measured not in rank or recognition, but in the ability to act decisively when lives depended on it. By midday, the chaos had subsided, leaving the canyon littered with debris, smoke, and the echoes of gunfire. Surveyed the scene, noting both the devastation and the survival of her unit. The veterans gathered around her, their expressions a mixture of relief, awe, and respect. Sergeant Daniels approached, clapping her on the shoulder. "Carter, you saved us out there. I don't know what we would done without you." Nodded, acknowledging the praise with quiet humility. She didn't need accolades. Her focus was always forward on the next challenge. Lieutenant Colonel, though injured, approached, his expression unreadable. "Your actions, remarkable. You stepped up when we needed you most." His lips curved into a small smile. She knew her role had shifted from the rookie everyone ignored to the strategist guiding the unit through chaos. The battlefield had recognized her competence in a way that words alone could never convey. The unit began to regroup, securing the canyon and assessing their losses. Continued to issue instructions, ensuring that every soldier, every civilian remained safe. She had proven herself not by rank, not by experience, but by foresight, courage, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. The rookie who had been dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated had become the linchpin of survival. And though the battle was not yet over, the village still awaited securing, and threats could appear at any moment, Carter had stepped fully into leadership. The soldiers who had doubted her now depended on her instincts and guidance. The rookie was no longer invisible. She had become indispensable. In the midst of battle, understood a fundamental truth. Respect is earned through action, not words. Today, she had earned it. Tomorrow, she would continue to prove that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all. The canyon had fallen eerily silent, the dust still rising from scorched earth and scattered debris. Carter stood at the edge of a ridge, scanning the battlefield below. Her eyes darted between the scattered militia forces and the reorganized convoy. The initial ambush had tested her instincts, and now the battle had shifted. It was no longer a fight for survival. It was an opportunity to reclaim control, to turn chaos into strategy. The militia had underestimated her from the start, expecting the rookie to falter under pressure. They had assumed experience alone would dictate the battle's outcome, but had already seen through their assumptions. She understood their formations, anticipated their movements, and identified the weak points in their positions. She was no longer reacting. She was orchestrating the next phase of the engagement. "Left flank," she shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. "Use the ridge for cover. Suppress fire until the enemy exposes themselves." Soldiers moved into position with renewed confidence, following her guidance without hesitation. Their movements were precise, each team covering the other, creating overlapping fields of fire that made it difficult for the militia to advance. Instructions were methodical, rooted in observation and careful analysis, yet executed with a speed that kept the enemy off balance. From her vantage point, noticed a small militia unit attempting to regroup near a cluster of buildings at the valley's far edge. She quickly assessed the terrain. The buildings offered cover, but the narrow alleys between them created predictable channels for movement. "Two volunteers with me," she called, signaling Sergeant Miller and Private. "We flank from the left. Keep low, move silently, and disable their communication points. Timing is everything." Miller and nodded, understanding the gravity of the task. Led them down the ridge with careful precision, navigating the uneven terrain with a balance of stealth and urgency. Bullets whizzed past, but the trio remained hidden by natural cover and shadow. His mind raced, calculating every step, every potential threat. She could feel the rhythm of the battlefield, the flow of combat, the ebb and surge of enemy aggression. Every detail mattered. Meanwhile, back at the ridge, the remaining soldiers executed her instructions flawlessly. The rookies and veterans alike relied on her strategic oversight. Overlapping fields of fire forced the militia into defensive positions. The enemy's initial momentum had been shattered. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Had predicted this, foreseeing that once their rhythm was disrupted, panic would follow. And it did. Through the smoke and chaos, spotted two militants attempting to set up a sniper position on a higher ridge. She quickly relayed orders. "Suppress that ridge. Watch the left flank. Do not let them establish a position." Her team opened fire, forcing the enemy to retreat or risk being neutralized. It was a decisive move that prevented the militia from regaining any advantage. As flanking team approached the building cluster, they encountered a barricade of makeshift explosives and debris. She analyzed the setup swiftly, recognizing the potential for a deadly trap. "We go around," she whispered. "Take the alley to the right. Stay low and keep moving. We disable their communication hub, then retreat to the ridge." Her calm, precise instructions allowed Miller and to navigate the hazards without hesitation. Meanwhile, the militia began to realize their strategy was unraveling. Their coordinated assault had been disrupted by leadership, and their attempts to regain control only led them into further disarray. Every tactical advantage they thought they had was now neutralized by her foresight and rapid execution. Had transformed the battlefield from a chaotic ambush into a controlled operation, using both strategy and terrain to her advantage. Back on the ridge, the veterans followed her instructions with precision. Bullets struck rocks and dirt, ricocheting harmlessly while the militia's formations crumbled. His voice rang out with authority. "Hold your positions. Suppress the enemy. Watch for civilians." Each command was clear, concise, and executed with exacting discipline. Soldiers who had doubted her hours earlier now relied entirely on her instincts and guidance. His flanking team reached the communication hub. She quickly surveyed the area and noticed the militia's radio equipment partially concealed under rubble. With careful precision, she directed Miller and to dismantle it while keeping watch for enemy movement. Sparks flew as they disabled the radios, severing the militia's ability to coordinate further attacks. His plan was working perfectly. With their communications gone, the enemy's organized assault began to collapse entirely. She signaled the flanking team to retreat to the ridge. Bullets sang past them, but the militia's fire was scattered and uncoordinated. His foresight had created an advantage that left the enemy exposed at every angle. The rookie they had ignored had become the key strategist, the linchpin of control amidst chaos. As the team regrouped, its mind remained alert. She scanned the remaining enemy positions, identifying pockets of resistance and predicting their next moves. Two teams push forward along the ridge, she instructed. Suppress any movement in the valley. Don't let them regroup. Her soldiers executed the orders flawlessly, advancing with coordinated fire and precision. Each move systematically reduced the militia's ability to fight effectively. From the valley floor, watched as the enemy retreated in small groups, disorganized and vulnerable. Civilians trapped near the outskirts were guided to safety by soldiers under her direction, ensured that the focus was never solely on combat. Protecting lives was just as crucial as defeating the enemy. Her leadership balanced aggression with caution, a combination that few of the veterans had seen executed so effectively. By mid-afternoon, the battle had shifted completely. What began as a desperate struggle for survival had become a controlled operation, orchestrated almost entirely by strategic vision. The militia, unable to regroup or regain control, entirely, leaving the battlefield in the hands of the unit she now commanded by default. The canyon, once a death trap, had become a testament to her skill, foresight, and courage. Soldiers gathered around her, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and awe. Sergeant Daniels, previously skeptical and dismissive, approached her cautiously. "Carter, I don't know how to say this, but you turned this battle around. We wouldn't have made it without you." Covered in dust and sweat, nodded quietly. Praise was secondary. The mission had been successful and the lives of her comrades and the civilians had been protected. That was all that mattered. Lieutenant Colonel, still recovering from his injuries, limped over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your actions remarkable. You stepped up when we needed someone to lead. Today you were more than a rookie. You were the heart of this operation." Eyes met his, acknowledging the respect without pride. She knew this battle was just one test of many to come, but for the first time she had earned the recognition she deserved. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon, surveyed the scene. The militia had been repelled, the civilians were safe, and her unit was intact. The rookie no one wanted to hear had not only survived the ambush but had turned it into a decisive victory. The soldiers who had doubted her instinctively now followed her guidance, knowing her decisions could mean the difference between life and death. In that moment, understood something profound. True leadership was not about rank or experience alone. It was about observation, preparation, courage, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. She had proven herself not through luck, not through force, but through the combination of intellect and bravery. The battlefield had recognized her competence, and the unit now depended on her in ways they never had before. The canyon, once a trap set by enemies, had become a testament to Carter's skill. She had turned the tide, transformed panic into coordination, and in doing so, established herself as an indispensable leader. The rookie who everyone had ignored had rewritten the course of the battle, and though the fight for the village was not yet over, his actions had ensured that her unit would face the next challenge with renewed confidence, and with her guidance leading the way. The sun had climbed high, burning off the last of the morning mist, casting harsh light on the battered canyon. Carter crouched behind a ridge, surveying the battlefield. The militia's initial ambush had been dismantled, their attacks scattered, but knew the danger was far from over. Somewhere in the village lay the enemy's command post, the nerve center coordinating every remaining assault. If it wasn't neutralized, the militia could regroup and reignite the fight. Every detail she had studied earlier, the terrain, enemy patterns, building layouts, guided her next move. Her team, exhausted but focused, looked to her for direction. Veteran soldiers who had doubted her mere hours before now hung on every word. "We move quietly," she instructed, pointing to a narrow alley partially hidden by rubble and vegetation. "This will get us close without drawing fire. Our target is their command hub. Disable it and the rest will crumble." Sergeant Miller and Private, her trusted flanking volunteers, nodded grimly. They knew the risk was immense, but they trusted her instincts implicitly. led them down the alley with precise steps, scanning every window, doorway, and shadow. She identified sniper positions and predicted militia patrols with uncanny accuracy. Bullets whizzed past at intervals, striking the walls and earth near them, but remained composed. Her calm, steady movements contrasted sharply with the chaos she had orchestrated earlier. She was no longer the rookie. She was the strategist, the guiding force, the soldier who had turned a deadly ambush into a controllable battlefield. Ahead, the command hub appeared, a small, fortified building tucked behind larger structures, partially concealed by debris and smoke. Quickly assessed entry points and potential hazards. Mines and traps had been placed around the perimeter. She signaled her team to halt. "We can't rush this," she whispered. "Approach from the left. Use the shadows, stay low. Timing and precision are everything." The trio moved in unison, sliding behind walls and debris, avoiding open spaces. Eyes flicked from point to point, tracking potential threats. She whispered instructions over her comms, directing other teams to provide covering fire and suppress enemy movement elsewhere in the village. Coordination was key. Every action had to be synchronized to prevent casualties and ensure success. Inside the building could see shadows moving, figures bustling around radios and maps, issuing orders. These were the leaders of the militia, the individuals responsible for orchestrating the ambush that had threatened her unit earlier. Took a deep breath, her training and preparation guiding her every move. "This is it," she murmured. "We take them down and this battle ends." With precise movements, she led Miller and around the final corner, keeping low and silent. Eyes locked on the radio equipment, the command center. "Disable the radios," she instructed. "Miller, watch the doors. If anyone comes out, you're ready." Her voice was calm but authoritative, cutting through fear like steel. They moved swiftly, worked on the equipment, hands steady despite the tension. Sparks flew as the radios were disabled. Eyes scanned the surrounding area, noting enemy reinforcements approaching. "Miller, cover me," she whispered. With a nod, he positioned himself to suppress any threats, sprinted forward, tossing a flash grenade into the building's main entrance. The explosion disoriented the remaining militia members, giving them a precious few seconds to act. And her team moved in, neutralizing the enemy quickly and efficiently. Shots rang out, but her precise aim and rapid decision-making minimized casualties. The command post was secure. The radios were destroyed, and the militia's ability to coordinate their forces had been eliminated. Chaos erupted among the remaining attackers. Without leadership, their assault collapsed entirely. From her vantage point outside, watched as militia forces fled in disarray. Soldiers in her unit, previously pinned down in the village streets, began advancing with renewed confidence, reclaiming lost territory. Her strategic strike had not only neutralized the command center but also shifted the momentum completely. The battle, once teetering on the edge of disaster, was now decisively under her control. Regrouped with Miller and checking their status, both were alive, shaken but unharmed. "Good work," she said quietly. "Let's get back to the ridge and coordinate the rest of the sweep." The three of them moved swiftly, guiding the remaining soldiers to secure the village and ensure that no threats remained. Back on the ridge, the veterans and rookies alike watched in awe as coordinated the final phases of the operation. Every instruction she issued was precise, deliberate, and effective. Soldiers who had mocked her earlier now followed her lead without question. The rookie they had ignored had become the linchpin of the entire mission. Lieutenant Colonel, bandaged but alert, approached cautiously. "Your actions extraordinary," he said, his voice filled with both relief and admiration. "You identified the enemy's command post, executed a flanking maneuver, and neutralized it. Without your leadership, we would have suffered heavy losses." Nodded, acknowledging the praise with quiet humility. She didn't seek accolades, she sought results, and the mission had delivered them. As the last pockets of resistance were cleared, ensured that civilians were escorted to safety. Her attention to detail extended beyond the battlefield. She checked on injured soldiers, coordinated evacuation routes, and confirmed that every threat had been neutralized. Her foresight, calm under pressure, and strategic brilliance had transformed what could have been a catastrophic mission into a decisive victory. The militia, now fully disorganized, had no choice but to retreat entirely. The village was secure, and the unit had survived with minimal casualties. Actions had rewritten the outcome of the battle. What began as a chaotic ambush had become a controlled operation under her direction. Soldiers who had doubted her capabilities now recognized her as indispensable, a leader forged in the crucible of combat. In the quiet aftermath stood on the ridge, surveying the battlefield. The canyon below, once a deadly trap, was now a testament to her skill, foresight, and courage. Dust and smoke still hung in the air, but the threat had been neutralized. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of exhaustion and relief, knowing that every life saved was a testament to preparation and decisiveness. Her unit gathered around her, expressions a mixture of relief, admiration, and respect. Sergeant Daniels approached first, his earlier skepticism replaced by awe. "You didn't just survive out there, you turned the tide. You saved all of us." Nodded, her focus already shifting to the next steps, the next challenges. Recognition mattered little. The lives of her comrades and the civilians were proof enough of her success. Lieutenant Colonel, despite his injury, addressed the unit. "Today, we witnessed exceptional leadership. Carter, you acted decisively, strategically, and with courage under fire. Your actions have ensured our mission's success. This unit owes you more than words can express." Eyes met his, acknowledging the respect without pride. She knew that leadership was not about titles, it was about action, precision, and the ability to protect those in your charge. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon. Looked at her team, veterans and rookies alike, and realized the transformation that had occurred. The rookie everyone had ignored had become the guiding force, the strategist, the hero. Today, she had not only survived but had rewritten the course of the battle. The lessons learned here would shape her career, her reputation, and the lives of those who followed her in the future. Carter, once overlooked and underestimated, had delivered a decisive strike that turned chaos into victory. She had neutralized the enemy's command, disrupted their coordination, and ensured the safety of her unit and civilians. The rookie they ignored had proven that preparation, observation, courage, and decisive action were more powerful than experience or skepticism. As the unit regrouped and the battlefield quieted, knew one thing: this was only the beginning. The battle had been won, but her journey as a leader, strategist, and hero was just beginning. And she was ready. The village, once a site of fear and chaos, had become a place of cautious calm. Carter stood at the edge of the central square, her uniform smeared with dust, sweat, and the remnants of the morning battle. Soldiers moved around her, checking equipment, tending to the wounded, and gathering what remained of the militia's supplies. For the first time since the mission began, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to look back at what had transpired. The sun had shifted lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the village streets. Civilians emerged from their hiding places, cautiously surveying the streets now cleared of threat. Children clutched their parents' hands, eyes wide but filled with tentative hope. Watched them from a distance, her chest swelling with quiet satisfaction. She had anticipated the ambush, orchestrated the defense, and delivered the decisive strike that saved lives. Every warning she had given that was ignored had come to fruition, and every action she had taken had ensured survival. Her unit began to gather in the village square. The veterans, those who had once doubted her abilities, now approached with a mix of respect and awe. Sergeant Daniels, always blunt, cleared his throat and finally met her gaze. "Carter, I don't know how to say it, but you were incredible today. I've seen a lot in my time, but what you did out there, that was something else." His words carried weight, not just because he was a veteran, but because they reflected the acknowledgement of someone who had witnessed her skill firsthand. His lips curved into a small, tired smile. Praise had never been her motivation. She had acted because it was necessary. Still, hearing it from the very soldiers who had mocked her before the mission was validating in a quiet, profound way. She glanced at her team, veterans and rookies alike, and saw a similar mix of admiration, gratitude, and relief etched across their faces. Today, she had proven herself beyond any doubt. Lieutenant Colonel, his injuries now attended to and stabilized, approached slowly. His face was stern but softened with genuine recognition. "Carter," he began, his voice carrying the authority of command yet tinged with something deeper, "your actions today have gone beyond expectation. You anticipated the ambush, directed the unit with precision, and executed a decisive strike that neutralized the enemy command post. Without your leadership, we would have suffered catastrophic losses." Nodded respectfully. "Sir, I only did what was necessary to protect the unit and the civilians." Her tone was steady, her humility evident. She had learned long ago that leadership was not about recognition, it was about responsibility. Every life saved, every successful maneuver was its own reward. His gaze lingered on her for a moment, measuring more than just her actions in combat. "Today, you demonstrated not only skill but courage, foresight, and composure under fire. You have earned the respect of this unit and have set an example that will be remembered." His chest tightened at his words. Respect from her commanding officer and the soldiers she served alongside was meaningful, but she knew the battle's significance extended beyond accolades. She had transformed from the overlooked rookie into the cornerstone of survival. The soldiers began to settle, regrouping and sharing stories of the firefight. Laughter and conversation returned, tinged with exhaustion but underlined with relief. Observed quietly, noting the subtle changes in dynamics. Veterans who had once dismissed her were now seeking her insight, following her guidance instinctively. The rookie no one listened to had become the strategist they now relied upon. Allowed herself a moment to reflect on the day's events. Every prediction she had made, every detail she had noticed in satellite images and maps, had been validated in real time. Every risk she had anticipated had emerged, and every contingency she had prepared for had been executed successfully. The ambush, designed to overwhelm and destroy her unit, had instead become the proving ground for her abilities. Civilians cautiously approached, offering gestures of gratitude. Women and children handed small tokens, flowers, handmade gifts, even simple drawings, as symbols of thanks for the protection they had received. Accepted them quietly, her heart touched. The faces of those she had saved were a silent acknowledgement of her actions, a reminder of why she had fought so fiercely. The mission had never been about recognition, it had always been about life and survival. Sergeant Daniels approached her again, this time more formally. "Carter, you've earned something we don't give lightly, our trust. From now on, if you give an order, we follow it. No questions." Nodded, understanding the gravity of his statement. Trust in battle was life itself, and today she had earned it through action, not rank. The veterans gathered closer, listening intently as shared her observations and lessons learned. Her tactical insights, her foresight, and her rapid assessment of the battlefield became an impromptu briefing for the unit. Soldiers asked questions, sought clarification, and absorbed every detail. For the first time, the rookie's knowledge was regarded as critical intelligence, shaping the understanding of experienced soldiers who had once dismissed her. Even Lieutenant Colonel listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions. Explained how she had identified the ambush points, predicted the militia's strategy, and coordinated the countermeasures that ultimately saved the unit. Her explanation was precise, methodical, and insightful. The commanding officer nodded appreciatively, recognizing the exceptional value of her tactical acumen. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the village, felt a sense of quiet fulfillment. The battle had been won, the enemy neutralized, and her unit intact. Yet beyond victory, the real change was in the perception of her abilities. She had transformed from the rookie no one listened to into a soldier whose insight, courage, and decisiveness commanded respect. She had earned her place, not through rank or experience, but through action. His reflection was interrupted by a soft voice. One of the civilians, a young girl, approached timidly, holding a simple bouquet of wildflowers. "Thank you," she whispered, knelt, taking the flowers gently. "You're welcome," she replied softly. The gesture, simple yet profound, reminded her of the true impact of her actions. Saving lives, protecting the vulnerable, and leading with courage. These were the measures of her success. Later, as the unit began to prepare for the return to base, stood at the edge of the village, overlooking the battlefield. The remnants of the militia had retreated, the canyon cleared, and the mission accomplished. Her mind reflected on every decision, every maneuver, every calculated risk that had led to this point. She had proven herself not just in combat, but as a leader capable of transforming chaos into strategy, panic into coordination. Sergeant Daniels approached once more, a rare smile on his weathered face. "Carter, never forget today. You changed the outcome. You earned this unit's respect and trust. Not many can say that." Nodded silently, absorbing the weight of his words. Respect, trust, and proven capability, they were now hers, hard-earned through courage and action. The rookie who had been ignored, underestimated, and dismissed had become the strategist, the hero, the guiding force. Carter had turned the tide of battle, protected lives, and secured the respect of her unit. She had faced fear, chaos, and skepticism, and emerged victorious. As the soldiers prepared to leave the village, took one last look at the streets she had defended, the civilians she had saved, and the battlefield she had mastered. The journey from overlooked rookie to respected leader had been a hard one, but today had cemented her place. And while the mission was over, knew her journey was only beginning. There would be more battles, more challenges, and more moments that would test her courage and skill. But for now, she stood tall, knowing she had earned her place in the hearts and minds of those she led. The canyon, the village, and the battlefield would forever bear witness to the day the rookie no one listened to became the hero they could not ignore. The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the canyon in shades of orange and gold. The battle-scarred village below lay quiet, the echoes of gunfire and chaos replaced by the hum of recovery and cautious life returning. Carter stood at the ridge's edge, her uniform still dusty and blood-streaked, her boots caked with mud. The wind carried the scent of smoke and charred earth, but also something subtler, the sense of survival, of victory, and of a mission completed against impossible odds. Around her, the unit moved with renewed purpose. Soldiers checked equipment, assisted civilians, and took note of the terrain, logging every observation for the next mission. But it was more than routine. There was a new energy in the unit, a quiet respect that wasn't there before. Veterans who had doubted her now sought her insight. Rookies who had once been intimidated found guidance in her presence. Had changed the dynamic of the team without even trying. Her actions spoke louder than any words could. Sergeant Daniels approached, a rare, solemn expression on his face. "Carter, you did more than survive today. You saved this unit and you changed the way we fight." His voice carried the weight of experience, tempered by humility. Nodded quietly, acknowledging the compliment. Recognition had never been her goal. She had acted because she had to, because lives depended on her foresight and courage. Still, hearing it from those who had witnessed her actions firsthand was undeniably gratifying. Lieutenant Colonel, now stabilized but still recovering from his injuries, gathered the unit for a debriefing. Soldiers listened intently as he recounted the battle, nodding precise observations, her tactical decisions, and the decisive strike on the militia's command post. His voice carried pride as he described how the rookie, once overlooked, had turned the tide of battle. "Her actions today have ensured not only our survival, but the success of the mission. She has earned the respect of every soldier in this unit," he declared. Felt a mixture of pride and quiet humility. Her journey had been defined not by rank or accolades, but by action, courage, and the ability to think ahead when others could not. The ambush had been designed to destroy her unit, but through observation, preparation, and decisive leadership, she had done far more than survive. She had led, protected, and ultimately inspired. As the debriefing ended, took a moment to walk through the village streets. Civilians were emerging cautiously from hiding places, some tending to damaged homes, others helping neighbors recover lost possessions. Children peeked curiously from behind doors, their eyes wide but filled with cautious admiration. A young girl approached, holding a small bundle of wildflowers. "Thank you," she whispered softly, knelt, taking the flowers gently. "You're welcome," she replied. It was a simple gesture, but it carried profound meaning, the tangible reminder of lives saved and hope restored. The soldiers, too, had stories to tell. Rookies who had once been timid found courage in her guidance. Veterans admitted, sometimes reluctantly, that they had underestimated her. Listened, offering quiet encouragement and acknowledgement, never seeking the spotlight. She had become a model of leadership through action, not words. The unit had been transformed not just in tactics, but in spirit, because they had witnessed a true example of courage and strategic thinking. Even as the village recovered and the soldiers regrouped, Sm's mind remained vigilant. She reviewed every detail of the battle, analyzing strengths, weaknesses, and lessons learned. Every decision she had made, from anticipating the ambush to coordinating the decisive strike, was a blueprint for future operations. She understood that experience alone did not guarantee survival. Preparation, observation, and quick, decisive action were equally vital. The evening sun cast long shadows across the canyon as returned to the ridge, surveying the landscape. She could see the remnants of the militia retreating in the distance, their organized attack broken and their morale shattered. The canyon, once a trap designed to overwhelm her unit, had become a testament to her strategic thinking and courage. Today, she had rewritten the narrative, not just for herself, but for everyone who had served alongside her. Sergeant Daniels joined her once more, this time with a lighter expression. "You know, Carter, I think the term rookie doesn't fit anymore," smiled faintly. "Maybe not," she admitted, "but titles don't matter as much as action. Today proved that." Daniels nodded thoughtfully, a rare moment of reflection crossing his face. "It's true. You've changed the way we operate. People will remember today for what you did and how you did it." Even Lieutenant Colonel, observing from the base camp, seemed to carry a newfound respect that went beyond formal recognition. He had seen firsthand how calm, precise leadership had saved lives and secured victory. Actions that would normally take months of training and experience had been executed flawlessly under her command. She had demonstrated that intelligence, foresight, and courage could outweigh years of experience when applied correctly in moments of crisis. That night, as the unit set up temporary camp, reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the rookie ignored by peers to the decisive force that had turned a potentially catastrophic battle into a controlled victory, she had grown, not just as a soldier, but as a leader. Every observation, every calculated risk, every act of courage had contributed to this moment. Her story was no longer one of doubt and underestimation. It was a story of triumph, skill, and respect earned under fire. The soldiers gathered around fires, sharing stories of the day's events. Laughter and camaraderie returned, tempered by exhaustion but strengthened by survival. Listened, quietly absorbing the changes in tone, the respect now evident in every word. She had become a symbol of what could be achieved through preparation, courage, and decisive action. The rookie who had once been dismissed had become the heart of the unit's morale and strategy. As she watched the sunset over the canyon, felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. The battle had been won, lives had been saved, and her unit had grown stronger because of her leadership. The lessons of the day would resonate far beyond the battlefield. Courage is not defined by rank. Foresight is as powerful as experience, and decisive action under pressure can change the course of events. In the days that followed, her actions were officially recognized. Commendations were awarded and stories of her leadership spread throughout the ranks, yet remained humble. The battlefield had tested her and she had passed, not for accolades but because she understood the true purpose of service, to protect, to lead, and to ensure survival when it mattered most. Looking out over the canyon one last time, felt a quiet satisfaction. The rookie who had been ignored, dismissed, and underestimated had proven herself through action, intellect, and courage. She had transformed the battlefield, earned the respect of her unit, and created a legacy that would be remembered by those she had led. The canyon, the village, and the battlefield stood as silent witnesses to her journey. Today had been about survival. Tomorrow would be about continued growth, leadership, and courage. Carter, once overlooked, had become the hero they could not ignore, the rookie who had turned the battle around, the soldier whose actions would inspire for years to come. As night fell over the village, finally allowed herself to rest. The battle was over, the enemy defeated, and the lessons etched into every soldier's mind. Her journey had proven that leadership was earned, not given, that courage under fire could define a career, and that one determined individual, no matter how underestimated, could change the course of history. Carter closed her eyes, reflecting on the day. She had faced fear, chaos, and doubt, and had emerged victorious. The rookie everyone ignored had become the hero they could not forget, and her legacy, the proof that preparation, courage, and decisive action matter above all, would endure long after the dust of battle settled.